Hey, everybody. It's great to see you on a Thursday. We're really looking forward to today's programming. And I'm just going to wait a little bit for a few more people to come in. But we're really excited about this new series about collectors' coffee. So if you have your coffee, that's good, but it's okay if you don't. Um, and we're just really excited to be able to shift our focus to that really important part of our community, which are the collectors who purchase and care for and share the art that we create. So this series this is the second one that we've done. The Collector's Coffee is all about collecting. The first Collector's Coffee that we did introduced 3 collectors and their collections and why they collect. And it was fascinating to hear from them because they were all very different and they collected very different types of fiber art. So today we're going to be hearing from a gallerist who sells a variety of different kinds of contemporary art through her gallery, including fiber art. And that's one of the trends that Jaimianne Jacobin, our host, has been talking about now for a while, is that while earlier in the fiber art tradition, people really focused on, I only collect ceramics, or I only collect turned wood, or I only collect quilts. That's no longer as common, and people like to collect a lot of different things. And that's why we're really excited to hear from Mindy about her gallery and how that's working. So today, this presentation was organized by Jaimianne Jacobin, who is on SAQA's board and is also the executive director of the James Renwick Alliance, which celebrates and advances American craft and craft artists through education, connoisseurship, and public appreciation and different kinds of programming. Their big spring weekend is going to be May 6th and 7th. So make sure you check out the James Renwick Alliance website to learn more about all the different exciting events that are going to be going on there. So Jaimianne has a lot of really interesting questions. You can see in the chat the list of artists that we will be showing you. And we hope that you will have lots of questions for us as we go along. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jaimianne and Mindy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martha. And of course, thanks to SAQA for hosting this event. I love talking about collecting craft because I think that the more that we support people getting involved in collecting, the more we support craft as a whole, we support the different mediums, and we support the visual arts. So I'm going to introduce Mindy just briefly. Mindy is someone who's been dedicated to the visual arts most of her life as an artist, an appreciator, collector, and educator. Also, Mindy owns the gallery, which Martha has mentioned. Mindy Solomon Gallery opened in 2009 in Miami, Florida. Has really garnished a reputation for showing medium-based works alongside studio-based artwork, meaning painting and drawing. So we're really excited to have Mindy here today. Because of that long-standing history, we thought she'd be perfect for this talk, but also because she has an exhibition opening in 10 days, I think it is, called Hand Over Hand, Textiles Today. So Mindy, thank you so much for being here. And thanks to everyone who's joining us from all across the world. Please do say hello in the chat as we continue this talk, and include any questions you might have for Mindy as we go through. So Mindy, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for that nice intro. Just a point of clarification, I actually opened the gallery in St. Petersburg, Florida for the first 4 years. So that was where I was living at that time.
Yeah.
So just but I've been in Miami now since 2013.
Thank you for clarifying. I do remember that. So maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about the gallery and how you came to own a gallery, and maybe a little more about your story in becoming.
Okay. So my background is, and for those of you that have heard me speak before, please bear with me, but my background is in the arts. My undergrad degree was in art education, and I pursued a Master of Arts degree following that, and also did graduate work in art therapy. So while that was taking place, I was also having children. So that kind of interrupted that second master's degree, but that was definitely pivotal in helping me to understand the difference between art education and benchmarks and outcomes versus the kind of more sacred investigatory practices within the study of art therapy, and getting in touch in a more meaningful way with the material that comes out of us into the work that we produce. So I'm very thankful for that education, and I taught for a number of years. I worked in a hospital in Cleveland, Ohio, Rainbow Babies and Children's, where I pioneered an art program there. And over the years, continued teaching and making my own work. But consistently throughout that whole process was an interest in collecting. And so it got to the point where the collecting became such a fixation for me, and I realized that this love of accumulation of objects was about storytelling. And in my early 40s, I thought I really want to tell stories. I'm having a midlife crisis, and I want to sort of not necessarily stay in these fields. And I love teaching, but I didn't necessarily want to stay in these fields that were, very focused on everyone else's needs, and more about what I needed to say with work that I felt was not being represented in the community that I lived in. So that prompted me to open a gallery. And in fact, right before the first show, which was called Three from Korea, featuring Sung Ya, who actually was part of the show Stage Stories at the Renwick. So I remember going to that opening before the show opened and spending time with Sung-gu, who I adore. And I was exposed at that point to Mark Newport's work, who I ended up later on putting in a show about masculinity. So the Renwick definitely had an impact on how I saw things down the road in my own program.
That's great. I love that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we support the Renwick Gallery, because I think it's had a lot of impact on so many people. So I think what we'll do is we'll jump kind of into your PowerPoint, where you have some images of the artists that will be displayed in the upcoming exhibition. And maybe this would be a good time to start talking about how you see textiles in the fine art world. So I know you just mentioned that you were at Expo Chicago and you were seeing other textiles. So maybe you can kind of tell us where you're seeing textiles today.
Well, for me, I've always been interested, as you know, material-based works. I mean, I'm probably one of just a few galleries that really embraces the multiplicity of material. And part of that reason for a lot of galleries is also a very simple one, which is storage. So you can't really warehouse a lot of, sculptural objects if you're in a 500 square foot, storefront space. So being that I'm not in New York, being that I'm in Miami, and I actually have a very generous size gallery, that enables me to, to continue to have this sort of open storage concept in the gallery. The textile work has always been interesting to me because of the history of textile and how it has been featured prominently throughout art history, and also how it functioned. The textiles, the tapestries within the castles that were also, not only were they decorative, but they were also keeping in warmth and maintaining cool temperatures. So, and became a record of history. And also the relationship that women have to textiles and how it later became so aligned with, feminist art and became so much more conceptual than functional. So I really liked all of those elements. So in terms of the fair itself, you mentioned Expo, and actually the booth that we curated, the premise was materiality as a contemporary art construct. So all of the things that we displayed were either textile or ceramic. And all of the artists were speaking from different diasporic perspectives, which is something that I also really enjoy showcasing within my gallery program. A lot of the artists that I work with have a lot of skills in their toolbox, as it were. Like, for example, this image that we're looking at right now is by an artist named Basil Kincaid, who, as you know, is in the Renwick collection, who I've been working with for a number of years, who has so many different aspects to his practice. He has done photography, he has done performance art, he has done video installation, but always and consistently dealing with textile, and comes from 7 generations of quilters. The work that we showcased in his solo show last year, which we're looking at, it was an incredible show, by the way. It was so powerful. Also brings in the integration of embroidery, because Basil had received a United States Artists Award in the traditional arts and used that money to seed a studio in Ghana. And Ghana is known for this great, just their great use of fabric and sewing and this whole skill set. So he brought in all these artisans to assist him in creating embroidered surfaces on this work. A lot of the images, so that, they all come from drawing. Drawing and line is a very important part of the core elements of this practice. So he's taking graphic images, importing them onto these surfaces, and then under his guidance, these artisans are then embroidering the images that you see. And then he's also sourcing kente cloth for some of these different borders. And they're just incredible. But within that, so many different ideas are being infused that really do come from more of the fine art side of the equation. But then he has this family history where he was helping his grandma make quilts years ago, just handing her fabrics, and they certainly never thought of themselves as artists.
Right. Yeah, of course. Well, I know Basil is one of the several artists that you have in your roster, and of course, one of multiple that you have in textiles. I really like what you spoke about in terms of using medium as a conceptual element. And I think that's where I personally see a lot of craft breaking that boundary into fine art. Right? I'm using all these air quotes.
Yeah.
Is when you're using medium as a conceptual quality. Are you seeing other galleries kind of also taking that on? And how are you seeing collectors considering introducing other mediums to their collection?
I definitely see, definitely at the fair, I saw other textile works on display. And I definitely see artists, you know, playing with it. I mean, there are definitely artists who work exclusively with textile and have always done so. But there's definitely an open-mindedness to doing more. And you know, people sort of saying, well, what if I consider this? And also there was an exhibition that I saw at the Boca Raton Museum of Art a number of years ago, where very successful commercial artists were outsourcing to create textile work. So they were working with, you know, knitting ateliers and master craftsmen to fabricate their imagery into a tapestry format. So I think someone just walked in the gallery and I'm actually by myself, so I should say, hello. Hi. Sorry, Mariana Rana. Hi, how are you? Nice to see, I'm actually giving a talk to the Renwick Art Alliance, which you're more than welcome to. We have these wonderful ladies that just came by. I don't know if you can see them. Say hi to all our audience out there. Yeah, we're talking about textile actually. Oh, interesting. And so you're welcome to join in and look around. I'm sorry, I'm kind of occupied, and Mariana, hi everybody out there listening. Sorry, stepped out for a moment, but please look around and I'll, yeah.
So funny.
So
I love that we're, you know, with you in the gallery.
it's IRL.
Part
It's
of,
IRL, LOL. So circling back to what I'm seeing as well is there's definitely more out there. And the context of how it's displayed will also very much define the audience. Because because you talked about like how, I think you touched on, well, how do collectors receive it? And you know, I think that exhibiting this kind of material in a contemporary art context will bring you a different appreciator.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was part of your original goal of the gallery, right? When we've spoken outside of this talk is, you know, bringing whether it be textile or ceramic into a fine art context.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you know, people were perceiving that work differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and it is, again, and that is not intended as, you know, that's not intended to be a negative towards the, you know, the craft loving community in any way, shape or form, but more about elevating the art to be recognized as something more precious, as opposed to, you know, folded blankets and dusty objects stuffed on shelves, never to be seen.
Yeah, I think there's actually been some really interesting conversations I've heard about viewing textiles in particular on a wall versus, you know, horizontally and different contexts.
Yes.
So then going back to the collecting part, how are you seeing kind of collectors embracing new mediums, whether it be textile or other? Are you seeing traditional fine art collectors that are kind of branching out more? Or are you seeing people who are kind of doubling down on the medium that they love? Or is it a mix?
Well, I have to say, I think in the contemporary art world, for most people that aren't necessarily, you know, deeply engaged in experiencing other ideas, painting is always going to be king. Mm-hmm. Just because that seems to be the way, that it's the easiest thing to experience. And you also have these moments where there's, you know, certain artists at any given time that are the ones that are in high demand, and you know, there's so much talent out there, but there'll be this sort of fixation with the person that's in demand now. That being said, there have been quite a few artists working within textile and ceramic, but textile germane to this talk, that have gone on to do very, very well. Derek Brackens, Bisa Butler, Basil Kincaid, that are really being recognized. And I think in looking at these installation images, you can see just how incredibly powerful this work was. And, you know, people really, really responded to it. I mean, the whole installation was so arresting and the images were so profound that people really were moved by them, and the show sold out. And I would say that no one that collected that work would be aligned with craft collecting at all.
Or textile collecting.
Or textile, yes.
So we can keep going through the slides a little bit. I know we have a bunch of really great ones from that exhibition that you mentioned. And I'm wondering when we're going to see some of the other artists coming up next that you're featuring in the upcoming exhibition. When you were looking at this exhibition that's upcoming, the Hand Over Hand, this is going to be the first survey, if I remember correctly, of textiles in the gallery. And I wonder what you were looking for when you were doing your research and what your research process looks like for introducing these type of group shows into the gallery.
Okay, that's a good question. I think I was looking for a cross section of material use. I mean, I don't know that I got every single thing that I could have, but we do have a lot. And so I was looking at people that worked within quilting. I was looking at people that did, you know, more rope work, traditional weaving, exploration of interpretation. It's hard to describe because this is not like my formal education. So it was more about like considering different visual ideas. And also, yeah, this is Coulter Fossil, who's a Southern quilter, textile artist. So I was really trying to get an overview of as many different genres as I could. And to be honest, a lot of my research comes from Instagram.
You're not the first gallerist I've heard.
Yeah, Instagram is an amazing resource for discovery. Now, Brandon Apaka, who we're looking at right now, used to live in Miami and is now in Colorado, and that work was that type of work was exhibited at a non-profit space in Miami called Dimensions Variable, which I happen to be on the board of, and Frances Trombley, who's part of our show, is one of the principals in that program and is an excellent weaver. So she's going to be in the exhibition as well. So that was, I was like, wow, I didn't know Brandon did that kind of work. So that's how I saw that. So it's really a matter of like just me kind of taking notes, keeping track, remembering things that spoke to me. You know, one of the artists in the show, Noah Reindorf, I saw her work at the Venice Biennale this past summer, and she was representing the Ghanaian Pavilion. And I said, oh, I really like that. And I took the chance of reaching out to her. And it's also relationships with other galleries I know and some of the artists that they exhibit. This is sorry to not be able to engage you. Okay, fine. Eric Meadell is an artist from LA, and these are all, you know, using like an embroidery technique, which is pretty fabulous. And someone, in the case of Eric, someone introduced me to his work. A client / collector said, you should really have a look. And I really liked it. And then I reached out to Eric and asked him to do a commission actually for my daughter of her cat, and gave it to her as a gift. Okay, interesting. There's a comment that came up and I have to remark on that. Says, seems like a lot of the artists being shown are men. That's not true, but I don't know. We can go through the list. I do try to be very sensitive and engaged with female artists as much as possible.
Yeah, it's actually an amazing, diverse lineup, and I really commend you. When I was looking through the artists and the work, and of course you mentioned the Biennale, which had an amazing amount of fiber work, in my opinion, this last year.
Yeah, a lot, and I loved it.
It did. It really did.
Historical too. So this work is Malaika Temba. Malaika is an artist. Her father is Tanzanian, and her mother is American, and they were in the diplomatic corps. I mean, they served in various embassies around the world, including some real like Somalia and the Middle East. So Malaika grew up traveling the world, but a lot of her interest is Tanzania, and you'll see images of transportation. So she's also thinking about labor and movement of goods, and these colorful trucks and buses that have such a big part of the way that those countries work, and it's such a part of the cultural flavor. This particular work I showed actually at Expo, and her process is often the integration of photo to digital, to kind of a digital manipulation, which in this case was then translated to or outsourced to an independent like knitting mill. So she will sometimes use knitting machines herself or outsource work. She also does paper making, weaving, quilting, all different forms. She got her degree at RISD in their textile program.
So it's funny that you talk about the mixing of mediums, because what I was going to say earlier, when I was looking through the artist, the use of multiple different mediums and materiality, but also design, deconstruction, and identity were all themes that I was kind of seeing throughout many of the artists. And I wonder if there's other themes that you're seeing in contemporary textiles, or I even think back to when you were saying that your exhibitions are telling stories. I wonder if you're seeing small narratives in the exhibition as you've been putting it together.
And this is a solo show, Malaika Temba, that we had a few years ago. And so you can see the breadth of her work as well. I'm thinking about it because I know it's going to come together, because as I say, when I do this, I'm just inviting people and like so circling back, what I tell my clients a lot of times when they're looking at work and they're like, well, I don't know if it's going to work. I said, listen, you're the curator. You're the one that makes all the choices for everything that you put in your home. So it's all going to work because you're the one picking it out. It's not like you're going to change your personality one minute and say, oh, I always like khaki green, but today I decided to wear pink glitter, which could still probably work with khaki green, but I have to have faith in the process. Mm-hmm. So I have been thinking about how things are going to get laid out for sure. But until all of the objects arrive and I start doing the thing that I do, that's when I'm really going to know how they're all going to align up. I
was actually just thinking that I might need to ask the same question at the end of the exhibition.
Yes.
I owned a gallery for a small time, and the more time you spend with work, the more you see different things and the different patterns you're gonna emerge kind of within themselves. So I haven't seen too many questions in the chat, but do feel free to put some questions in, and I have a few more. I kind of wonder, going back to the idea of collecting, my expertise is in the maybe craft collecting, right? Like that's what I do. Those are the people that I know. And often it's said that the height of collecting craft was in the 80s, and now it's kind of ebb and flowed since then. And I think Artsy is a great resource online that looks very much at trends in the art market. But I wonder, as a gallerist, what trends you're seeing, and kind of maybe where, I guess that was a lot of context to say, what trends are you seeing in collecting, and how you see the market going?
I think that there's I think that these articles, while and I am a participant in the Artsy platform, and they've, been certainly shine their light on us on a number of occasions, but I'm wary of tastemaking. I think there's a lot of outside market forces that try to like the auction houses, candidly, the large auction houses. I mean, they definitely have an outsized voice in the marketplace, and, will try to redirect or highlight. And I have a problem with that because I feel like it takes away from the intuitive nature of how we respond to work and why we should respond to work. So in terms of trends, it's been an interesting time because during the lockdown period, all the gallerists were joking because, some people just had their best years ever because vacation money, going out to dinner, all of that stuff was not being spent, and people were just sitting in their homes going, dear God, I can't look at another white wall. So artists that were on social media were really building, a fan base, and galleries were able to really optimize digital platforms. And it was a time where definitely figurative artists were, reigning strong. And also because of all the things that have been happening politically during those time periods, the artists had the artwork definitely was very message driven. I think what I'm noticing now is not a negation of figurative artists by any means, but an interest in maybe potentially taking a little bit of a breather from some of the intensity of that story and looking more at non-objective works. Hang on just a second, Mariana, excuse me, could you just take that there? Thank you. So I think that if there's any trends that are taking place right now, it may be a push towards abstraction or a revisiting of abstraction. Also, transcendentalism, looking at artists that worked in transcendentalism like Agnes Pelton that have maybe been overlooked. There's definitely some interest in that. I think that goes to this time of like introspection. So how does that align with textiles? Well, so much of textile work is abstraction. And I think that people want that. I think they want maybe a little bit of a brain break in terms of the grander narrative right now, not taking away at all, by the way, of figurative work. I still think that it's all important. Whatever the means is to tell the story matters. But in terms of where the art world may be redirecting people's attention right now, I would say it looks like abstraction and material-based works are having a moment.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the material-based works. And so what trends would you see specifically, or would you say in the market? I mean, I know some galleries that say if you're not doing fairs, then you're not, like, you don't have a living to be made.
I mean, listen, I feel like, almost 14 years in the gallery world is like 750 in dog years. I don't know. It's a grind. I think that fairs can have a place for sure. I don't feel like I want to do as many as I did 10 years ago. Number one, I don't have the energy for it. It's very draining. And you have to be judicious. You have to sort of edit where you want to be seen. But it is a part of building a client base, not singularly, but definitely a part. Again, I go back to Instagram. I mean, Instagram, we have 31,600 followers right now. That's a lot of eyeballs. Whether all 31,600 are looking at every post that I create, there's certainly a lot more people looking at it than walking in the door.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think that most gallerists would agree. So I would say second, oh, hi, that Melissa Joseph piece is, I see the question there. Mariana, do you know how big the Melissa, sorry, I have to get some assistance here, the smaller work from Expo, that's a great piece, by the way. And that's felted wool, and Melissa Joseph is currently doing the residency at the Mad Museum. 30 by 30 framed, 30 by 30 with a beautiful frame for the person who inquired. And that's another thing, by the way, that the kind of exposure that the artists that you're involved with are getting as well is reflected back to the gallery too in those relationships. If the artist is, you know, really recognizing the value of that gallery relationship and supporting promotion in a cross-promotional way. So art fairs have some influence, artsy online platforms, the exposure of artists and how they're recognizing gallery representation. Certainly, and not least of all, are exhibitions. But sometimes you say, if the tree falls in the wilderness, did anybody actually hear it? And it goes back to, how do we promote these images? How do we archive these images? How do we catalog these shows so that they can have value and be seen by so many more people than will necessarily be walking in the front door?
Yeah, and I think that's a service that many artists or many people in general forget that that's what a gallery does. A good gallery is there to really not only represent the artist, but help the artist build a brand and help the artist get in front of as many people as possible. And also that context that you were talking about earlier, putting the work in the right context, and every artist has a different context that works best for them. We do have some artists on the call, and they were asking about maybe approaching galleries. It sounds like in general, you don't take a lot of people who kind of knock at your door because you're already doing that research. Would you say that's accurate? And then also maybe what is a recommendation for artists looking for expanding their market? And I'm not going to say get into galleries, because that's not the only way, as you have said today already.
Well, there's a lot of questions I see from artists. Can we circle back, because I was listening to you, reading the questions.
I'm specifically talking about, like, how do artists expand their market? And the reason why the question that I'm asking is not how do artists get into galleries, is because there are other options, like you were saying with Instagram, or like you were saying where you've seen some of this artwork at other exhibitions, and that's how you found them and invited them into the gallery.
I think that, okay, all right, somebody's saying that, okay, just circling back, because someone talked about how textile is becoming very abstract, but interestingly, all the work she shows so far in her gallery is very representational. Interesting that you bring that up. I didn't mean to imply that textile is exclusively abstract, because clearly it isn't. And yes, there is definitely strong narrative context in all of the works that you've looked at. So thank you so much for pointing that out, but not exclusively, but definitely some storytelling imagery going there. So thank you for bringing that up. In terms of textile artists being able to approach galleries and not experience like a sort of a bias about the work, or not being able to be accepted in the contemporary art context. I would suggest one of the best ways to promote yourself again is to utilize the digital platform effectively in how you tag the work, but just be, rigorous in self-promotion, rigorous. And that is a way for gallerists to have a very sort of stealth experience with it, because we don't necessarily want to be, exposing the fact that we're looking at your work, because then you could, get very eager and maybe just take it too far. I mean, these things can happen. But I would say be really rigorous in your visual promotion. Be sensible about the galleries that you're going to. I mean, I've had artists say to me, I make work just like that. I think you should show me. And I'm like, well, first of all, why would I want to show something that looks just like somebody else? That's not adding anything to the program. And there's a difference between showing work in an exhibition, like at this large group exhibition, and representing artists as well. Because representing is a long-term commitment that means going through all the various permutations of what they do and how they develop. Group shows are a way to, like this, to almost be a survey of work. I would encourage artists to also take matters into their own hands and say, okay, I want to organize a group exhibition with my colleagues. Now, you could potentially approach a gallery or a nonprofit. Galleries generally, have programming already scheduled. So, calling someone on a phone and say, I want to have your Basel slot. Well, I mean, we're 2 years out, sorry,
Yeah.
But you might be able to do something for yourself, where you can get a group of artists together to share cost and do your own exhibition in a space that you might be able to find and rent and staff. Create your own alliance, create your own group. I mean, look at, a lot of great movements in the past, a lot of, the surrealists, the Salon de Refusnik, they all sort of started their own gig until somebody started paying attention. So sometimes you have to bring the mountain to you. You can't just be out there shopping it. Maybe you need to bring people to what you're doing.
Yeah, I always say it's about finding like a match in mission, in aesthetic, and interest. So for artists who are trying to get into galleries, it works that way. For collectors who are looking for new work, it also works that way, right? It's like an aligning of interests, really. And
I would say that, but I would also say, and listen, the galleries have to go through the same hard processes that artists do. You have to get a reputation. You have to be recognized as someone that has, that is a tastemaker, that brings new ideas that can be vetted, that, someone can feel like there's this this quality control element, that what they're receiving has been researched or vetted before they're actually going to invest in it. And
Yeah.
that takes a really long time.
I think that's a really great point. So sometimes about consistency and
Yeah, people, I mean, the collecting public wants to know that the place that they're doing business with has, has integrity.
and a sense of stability. Absolutely. Okay, well, speaking about your gallery, and we talked a little bit about the art fairs, what does a year look like for you? I think I meant to ask this question earlier, and maybe I'm taking a little bit of a step back. But even, you have some people coming in today, which is great.
Yeah. I kind of feel bad because I couldn't, the one time, it always happens that way.
Yeah.
People coming in, two great ladies, and I'm like, sorry, I can't talk to you.
Yeah. So in terms
Well, we're first of all, the gallery is like, we're busy. We're probably busier in terms of programming than most galleries, and definitely in Miami. We've got shows all year. I generally program about 2 years in advance. I'm doing programming for 2025 now. I just decided to do a fair, a contemporary art fair in Ibiza. I think I'll probably be the oldest person there. But that's fine. I mean, this artist I work with named Jaime Jacobin, who is an incredible, now this is a perfect example of the kind of artist that really exemplifies the way that this program works. Jaime is a painter. Jaime is a designer. Jaime does ceramic. Jaime just had a survey of textile work at the High Museum. Sort of this Renaissance creative. And so the fact that Jaime's in Valencia, one city over from Ibiza, has, inspired me to say, let's do something together. So we have that this summer, but in addition to that, we go from this massive textile show into 3 separate group shows within the gallery that are a combination of painting, sculpture, and mixed media. And then there's 3 solos this summer of 3 separate artists working in ceramic, right into fall with textile. And I mean, we are booked all the way through. So we're always having to think about logistics and also, making sure that we network with collections and loans and all of the things that we need to do within the gallery. So it's busy.
Yeah. So you guys do, what would you say? How many exhibitions a year? How many shows a year? And then how often are you doing lectures and talks like the one today?
Well, the Renwick really likes me a lot. I think I need like a gift certificate to Longhorn Steakhouse or something. But anyway, I mean, we have so when we open the textile show on the 30th, which is a Sunday afternoon, we're hosting a group from the Perez Art Museum and doing a little reception before that. I haven't really figured out, other programming, but I will hopefully be able to introduce that during the run of the exhibition. I mean, I would say we average 2 to 3 fairs a year. And, definitely during December, we're busy because we have the show, and then, we do a fair here. So that keeps us on our toes.
Yeah.
And really just trying to, and we do a progressive art program, brunch program, which I developed a number of years ago that has currently 11 other Miami galleries participating, where people go from, gallery to gallery and have like, a mimosa and a little nibble and move around. And that's been really well received.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that goes back to what you were talking about with artists networking together. It goes the same for galleries networking together. And I think that's another reason why fairs are successful, is because galleries come together in one place, which makes it.
And they bring their own fan base, which is going back to when you asked me what can artists do? Well, if a collective group of artists decide to organize an exhibition together, they can optimize their own networks,
Mhm.
get a lot of, people to respond, and they can always contact an independent curator as long as they're willing to honor the curator and pay for their service and say, listen, we're interested in doing something. Could you help us to put something together? There are ways that you can take your career in your own hands.
Mhm.
You don't have to rely on a gallery. You can also reach out to art advisors, independent curators, designers.
Mhm.
And there are some artists that have very rigorous studio practice just working with interior designers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, we've given some good advice to our artists. What advice would you give to emerging collectors or people who are thinking about getting started collecting? And are you seeing new collectors kind of enter the field?
Yes, I do. I think that for young collectors, it's a big step. You're always nervous about whether you can afford something or, is this the right time? And I think that there are ways that galleries can assist collectors with acquisition if it's not something that they have budgeted for. There's something called art money, which we participate in, that enables people to buy work and pay interest-free over 10 months' time. And that's kind of a nice option if people want to acquire works but don't necessarily have the budget for it. Working with galleries that you trust, that have a good reputation, that have knowledge about the work and can speak about it. And you can, that's easy to find out, just talk to people. And trust your gut. Once you find a place to do business that you admire and that you like the principle and you like the program, within that framework, trust your gut.
Yeah, I think first, most collectors don't know that there are opportunities to buy over time. And so I'm so glad you brought that up. But then secondly, almost every collector I know, and Mindy, you'll laugh because you know the same, has a story of something they wish they purchased and didn't. And sometimes I tell people that, it doesn't always matter if it's going to be an artist that is going to be the biggest name. If you don't trust your gut and you don't purchase the piece, you might be in a pickle later on where you're still thinking about it. And I've met plenty of collectors too who've gone back and found the piece and had to buy it off the secondary market 20 years later.
I think that people do a really good job of talking themselves out of things.
Sure. Yeah.
And for me, like I actually, I get triggered by white walls. I literally get triggered. I had when we were moving and we were renovating houses, all of my collection, of course I was infilling because I'm an addict, but everything was in storage. And it was like, I want my stuff. And just filling up those spaces. Now there are extreme cases, and I know that those of you that are in the extreme case network know what I'm talking about, okay? And I'm one of them. But I think that, that's a good question. What collection budget per year would constitute a good starting point? Well, listen, there are some people that think that an emerging artwork. I'm sorry, Elaine, I don't know how to turn that off. And the person that asked about the AI, you got the wrong lady. I don't, I'm just figuring out, I've graduated from Facebook and now I'm on Instagram, but AI is still an unknown for me. In terms of budgeting, some people think that emerging art, I've had some advisors say emerging art goes up to $75,000. I'm like, I don't know what, planet you live on, but not in my mind, okay? But I would say there's a couple ways you can do it. You can say, okay, I love this artist and I'm gonna buy like one significant piece a year. What does significant look like to you? Is it 5,000? Is it 10,000? Is it 20,000? Is it 50,000, etc.? If there's an artist that you really like, and while you're paying attention, notice there's a lot of interest in that artist at the same time. And if you really, really like it, I would encourage you to find a way to get it. Now, you can talk to the gallerist, and if there's work available and the gallerist senses that you're sincere, there are ways that they can work together so that you can acquire that. But really, what percentage you want to invest in is a matter of what you feel. Say hi to everybody at the Renwick Alliance. We're on more visitors. The Renwick Alliance, this is pictures of the gallery. This is well, you guys are based in DC. It's the Renwick of
Yeah,
the
but SAQA is actually
yeah.
international.
So we have some wonderful visitors and we're just talking about collecting. Actually, I should ask them, what do you think is a good, someone had a question, what collection budget per year would constitute a good starting point? That's the door opening and closing, by the way.
Thinking of myself, I don't know.
Okay,
10,000.
5 or 10,000. 5 or 10,000. What about you?
What are we purchasing, or?
Yeah,
I'm a designer.
she's a designer.
I don't know, I say 5,000.
5,000. So,
Yeah.
so the feedback from here is 5,000. So okay, what can we get? Looking at some of the work that I've shown you, just for reference, 5,000. I'm thinking about the things that are coming into the textile show specifically. Now, the smaller Melissa Joseph piece that we looked at, that particular piece is 7,000. I also want to say that Melissa Joseph just showed a frieze, and she's got the residency at the Mats. There's a lot of things happening for her. And yes, I agree with you, Sharon.
So it's
Yes,
interesting.
I agree with you. I think it would be a lot higher, but I think 5,000 for a new collector is a very fair number to start with. And for some, listen, I'm not throwing that around, like that's not chump change to a lot of people in the world. Okay, that's definitely not. So I think that's very respectable. And I can tell you, within the textile show that we're exhibiting, we have a number of really great pieces that are even under 5,000. That are significant.
And I think that's Mindy, I just want to hop in for a moment because I think that's such a good point as well, right? People don't know that you can make payments. People don't know that you can get started collecting with not a huge investment. There's a group out of Philadelphia that try to create and cultivate collectors of Philadelphia-based art. And they say 10% of your income. And I thought that was so interesting at first. And I thought, oh, that's what? It was so taken, but actually what I would say is that everyone can be a collector. And you can be at any level. I know in ceramics, I call ceramic mugs the gateway drug of collecting.
That's how I started. I mean, I was not very good at pottery, so I started buying a lot of it because I really loved it. And the very first piece that I always look at is the one that my husband and I bought on our honeymoon. It was a raku sake jar in 1986 that we called the bullet. It just kind of looked like a little bullet, but I mean, that was a great way to get started. And then that expanded to other things. So I mean, Malaika Temba did a series of works that were paper where she integrated textile, and it was handmade paper in Kenya. And those pieces were $1,000 and $1,200. And they're quite beautiful. And it's handmade and it's uniques. So there are ways to start. Again, I would look for the galleries that you really like, and hopefully I'm one of them. and, you know, see what we can do, how we can advise you and guide you, and what we can show you to support your interest. And a lot of times when people walk in the door and they don't know what they want, we sit down with them and we show them the website, and we just go through each artist that we work with and look at them to see where their eyes are lighting up. And that's like the, you know, I call that being an art whisperer. How to find out.
Well, thank you so much, Mindy. I don't want to keep people past 3. It's already 3 o'clock. I'm so glad your visitors could also impromptu join us.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I'm glad that we could. When you consider bringing in new artists, do you also consider the price points of their work, or do you look at the work first and foremost and help the artist to adjust the prices for their new market? Can I answer that? I know we're
Sure, go ahead.
Because that's a very good question. And no, I don't look at price point. I don't look at price point if I like the work. We do support artists in pricing works. I was just talking to a young artist named Daniela Gomez Paz, who is going to be in the show, and we'll have a solo show in the fall. She's an MFA candidate at Yale, and we chatted extensively about prices. I would say that the price is what the market supports. So whatever you were able, if you had a body of work and you sold out a show immediately, maybe you go up 10%. I'm very conservative. I don't like to overprice, because once you establish a price, you can't take it back down, especially for the people that paid that. So I think that being conservative with your pricing, starting out even lower than you think you should, is a good way to test the waters and get the stuff out of your studio.
Mhm.
You want to keep schlepping it around for the rest of your life? I don't think so. I mean, you know, you're just gonna have a lot of stuff to move from point A to point B. So sell it, move on, make new.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Mindy.
Thank you, Mindy. It's been wonderful.
Virginia, you're going to send us photos. She's in the chat.
Yeah.
She's coming to the
Okay.
show.
And if you want to see, we will have great installation shots probably about a week or 2 after the show goes up. So stay in touch. And if anyone's interested in learning any more about any of the artists in the show, please feel free to reach out to the gallery.
Oh, thank you. Yep, follow her on Instagram, then you can see everything.
Yes, exactly. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A few final words?
From me?
No, Martha. I was saying Martha.
Oh, no, this has just been wonderful. Thank you, Mindy, so much. Really interesting to hear your point of view as a gallerist. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. We will let you know when the next program is ready, and we hope to see you then. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye.